Welcome to Tone Talks. Welcome to Tone Talks. Welcome to Tone Talks. What up, y'all? This Tone Talks in the building. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We're going to have a great show today. I got great guests. It came to me during the middle of the week that a great study came out about some of the issues that we've been confronted for the last year or so, actually for the last few years. And I wanted to bring in some people who can speak to this study and speak to this context and really have a really good discussion around this. I have Dr. Kevin Cosby and Professor Thornhill. Are you guys both there?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for making time. I know it's a little late on the East Coast, but I think this will be a powerful show. So let's give a little background. Professor Thornhill, professor at Florida Gulf Coast University, did this powerful study on black students and how white universities are picking non-radical black students, and he'll lay that out for us in a second. And then I have Dr. Kevin Cosby. He's the pastor of St. Stephen's Baptist Church and also president of Simmons College, HBCU, in Kentucky. And I think that both of them together will give us great context. I want to start off by reading a few questions, Professor Thornhill, and then I'm going to just let you lay out what your study was, why you decided to do it, because I think a lot of people have been sharing it, but I want to give them a chance to hear from the horse's mouth what you found and how you set it up, the methodology. So number one question, again, well, let me lay out the title. Title of the show is Black Raceless Student Wanted in White America. So number one, what does it mean for Black America that admissions officers at universities are avoiding black radical students in favor of black raceless students? Number two, what is the role of sports, Jordan and Kobe, television, Cosby and Fresh Prince, and politics, Obama and Kamala, in making American blackness raceless? Number three, who fits where? You know, we're going to go through some celebrities after we let go of the callers, and we're going to see where do they fit? Where do they go in the whole paradigm of everything that we see? Now, the other thing that we're going to do is number four, what is the consequence of Black America if there's no black radical thought leaders? Number five, where do biracials like Obama and Tracy Silberstein fit, and do they undermine black progress for conciliatory individual acceptance? White parent, black parent. That's what we're talking about. Number six, why is American DOS, that's American Descendant of Slavery as a classification, a major part of pushing to force fairness for black activists? Number four in the categories that we're going to get from Professor Thornhill. And do new immigrants jump into the racelessness of categories 1 through 3 that he's going to lay out to run from the cost of blackness? So let's just get right into it. Can you both say hello to the audience?
Hello.
Thank you for having me, Antonio.
Honored to be with you.
Thank you so much. So, Professor Thornhill, let me just start off with you. Can you please lay out this powerful study? We all found out about it from Forbes, and we just, everybody been sharing it. Can you lay out what you were trying to find out when you did it, and did you expect everything? Go ahead and just dig into it.
Okay, so again, thanks for having me. So the origin of the study is really a book I read called Acting White, Rethinking Race in Post-Racial America, post-racial in quotes, by Devin Carbato and Neetu Gulati. These are two critical race legal scholars. And the central argument of their book is that in the purportedly post-racial era, organizations no longer attempt to exclude blacks totally. Most organizations now actually want some black folks, but they can pick and choose the types of black people they want. And they contend that white organizations tend to embrace those black folks who are less racially salient, those individuals who are deracialized, so to speak. And so this book was based on case law as its evidentiary grounding, but it didn't have any empirical data. So what I wanted to do is test the theory that they advanced. And so what I did is I designed what's called an audit study, where I communicated with white college admissions counselors at 500 plus institutions. I sent out 1,000 emails, over 1,000 emails to these white college admissions counselors. What I did is I created 4 narratives, 4 racial types or types of manifestations of blackness that these white admissions counselors might encounter in their everyday jobs when they're doing their admissions work. The first 2 types, type 1 is what I call nondescript. This is somebody who was interested in English and math. They volunteered at the library as a tutor. The only reason that the admissions counselors would know these folks or this person was black was because they had a black racialized name. That was the cue to signal to the counselors that this was a black student. But the substance of their interest was deracialized. The second one is what I called environmental sustainability black. So similarly, the only reason that these counselors would know that these individuals were black was the racialized name. These two types of students were less racially salient. And the other two types that I created were what I called more racially salient blacks. The third category was a kind of what I called racial unity black. These individuals were interested in African American history and culture. They were involved in culturally resonant activities like gospel choir and jazz band, but they had a statement in the narrative that said cross-cultural understanding, which was meant to provide a kind of softening of their race consciousness.
People of color.
The final category, right. The final one is what I call anti-racist black, and this narrative had interest in an anti-racist student organization. They were involved in their community in terms of promoting issues of racial justice around criminal justice reform and education. And what I found is that these white college admissions counselors were much less likely, significantly so, to respond to the last type of student.
Oh, so basically you're coming to a conclusion that the black radical student, and fundamentally what I call the student that gave us everything as black folks, was getting a lot less response in this modern admissions policy kind of era where we can just go by diversity.
Correct. It was and actually there was no difference in the response rate overall for those first three categories. Statistically speaking, those first three categories, the response rates were identical, statistically speaking. And then the latter category, the fourth one, that's the one where we see the big drop-off.
So you're telling me there was no difference between, it's funny because your second category was an environmental activist. I also put a gender activist inside the second category as well. So there was no difference if you're raceless or if you're people of color or if you're an activist of environment and gender. The only thing that matters is if you start talking about black folks in a real way, right?
Right. I mean, the third category suggested an interest in African American history and culture, but it was apolitical though. There was no racial politics in there, and so the response rate for that narrative was the same as those black students who were not interested in any racial issues at all.
Dr. Cosby, I have you here for a very particular reason. As a president of an HBCU, the last HBCU, is there any question that you want to ask Professor Thornhill, or is there anything you want to particularly add to this part of the discussion?
Well, first of all, thank you, Tone, for inviting me to be a part of the conversation, and thank you, Dr. Thornhill, for your research. And I think that this research probably is not only true when it comes to college admissions, but it's probably true in every white governed institution in society. Anglo conformity is a real issue in our society, and white America has always looked for those either accidental blacks or incidental blacks, because you have three basically categories of blacks. You have accidental blacks who are just blacks by accidents of birth. You have incidental blacks who happen to be black but do not have a commitment to advancing a black political agenda, and then you have intentional blacks. And the whole goal, I think, of to some degree integration has been the de-radicalization of black consciousness and an attempt to create Anglo conformity so that black people will take priority in other people's issues to the exclusion of their own, which has, I think, its roots also in slavery. If you read the book, The Peculiar Institution by Kenneth Stamps, he has a chapter in there called The Making of a Slave. And in that chapter, he said, after reading many of the slave manuals, that the way that slavery was not only physical, but it was psychological. In fact, it had to be psychological before it could be physical. So the part of the slave indoctrination was to get the slaves to take an interest in the affairs of the master over above their own. And here we are, 150 years removed from chattel slavery, and the same psychological strategy is still in place today.
And so let's get right into it, Professor Thornhill. I know I don't have you too long. Give us some of the responses you got back from the black radical student, like from white admissions officers, in more specific instance.
Right. Well, so these are professionals, these admissions counselors. So I didn't encounter any overtly racist statements or communications from these admissions counselors, and I hadn't expected that to be the case. So the second stage of my study is to analyze the substance of the emails that I received, because there was significant variation in the types of responses that these admissions counselors sent. So some of these communications to the anti-racist student were encouraging, and some of them even copied in the email professors that are interested and do research in areas that I do to get those students connected. But that was not the norm, though. And some of the responses were boilerplate and curt. You know, they were very perfunctory. You know, please check the website. If you're interested in applying, here's a link, click this. And so what I'm doing now is to look for the themes that emerge over all four narratives. So I've not completed that analysis yet.
So let me ask both of you this first question. I'm going to come to you first, Dr. Cosby, and I'm going to come to you, Professor Thornhill. Dr. Cosby, what does it mean for Black America that admissions officers at universities are avoiding Black radical students in favor of Black raceless students? Let me frame it. My belief is that what we see is that everything that African Americans have comes from the Black radical student, pushing forward, ever forward. Power concedes nothing without demand, as we've heard from Frederick Douglass. And so effectively, you know, without that student, all of this will fall apart for Black students, for African American families across the nation. I just want to get your opinion, Dr. Cosby.
Oh, I totally agree. It's a form of psychological eugenics, you know, I think. And it is, as I said, an attempt to de-radicalize Black politics. And without a radical political agenda, there will be no substantive change for Black America. But part of this is due to the fact that Black people have been deinstitutionalized. And when you lose your institutions and you depend on other people to educate your people, then they're going to educate you away from your own interest. And so radical political education for Black people means to be educated in those things that advance the Black political agenda. As the president of an HBCU, we do not apologize for the fact that we are going to immerse our kids in a knowledge of and a celebration of self. In fact, knowledge and education is really just a three-part process. Anytime education is three things. It's first of all, it's fascination. You learn because the mind is fascinated to learn certain things, but then it moves to regimentation. You go from fascination to regimentation, and then ultimately the true test of education is application. Is what I am learning, does it apply to the advancement of me and my people? And if it does not apply to the advancement of me and my people, then it is what Carter G. Woodson called the miseducation of the Negro. So it's critically important that we have our institutions and HBCUs that are true to their historic mission, that give Black kids ethnic armor, because when they wade into a world dominated by white interest, then having that ethnic armor, knowing who you are, being immersed in your culture, your experience, and your agenda is critically important.
Man, Dr. Cosby, you know, that was fire. And Dr. Thornhill, I don't know how much longer I have you. Hopefully I can get you through the second question. But let me come to you. Again, this is Dash Radio, Dash Talk X. black raceless student wanted in white America, coming to you, the man that made this study possible, Professor Thornhill. What does it mean for Black America that you found that admissions officers at 500 colleges are avoiding black radical students in favor of black raceless students?
I mean, it's a significant problem because what's happening is these white counselors are actually serving as gatekeepers for these institutions. And so when they screen black students that have an anti-racist ethic and politics out, what they're doing is they're depreciating the collegiate aspirations of these students. You know, when you send out a communication to an admissions counselor, you expect to get a response. I found that, you know, let me just highlight one of the most powerful findings, that it was when white male counselors were communicating with black young women who were interested in saving the planet, they responded to those emails about 75% of the time. When those white male counselors were communicating, when they received an email inquiry from young black women committed to black politics, black anti-racist politics, the response rate was 37%.
Let's dig into that.
So
let's dig into that a little bit more. So was there this variation between white male admissions officers and white female admissions officers generally that you saw? Anything that jumps out off the page?
So there were no significant differences between the response rates overall for the white men and the white women counselors. But what we see is that the white men responded to black women less favorably overall relative to relative to the black men. That's correct. And there was also patterns whereby black men were the least likely to be responded to overall. So black women had a slightly higher response rate. But let me highlight that only 6 out of 10 emails actually generated a response overall. So so I expected there to be a significantly higher response rate overall. But interestingly, when I did a subsample of emails with white sounding names for the first 2 narratives, and there was no difference, meaningful difference between those emails and when I sent them from black students. So what this suggests is that a lot of admissions counselors are just not doing their job like they're supposed to. Mm-hmm. Because when people send you email, and a lot of institutions need enrollment, they need enrollment and they need tuition revenue. So one would expect them to be responding to these emails in general. But I was not surprised by the findings. This is what the theory suggests. We know that white folks don't like black folks that challenge white racial domination. It's just like I in another paper talk about historical intraracial discrimination. This practice is not a new phenomenon. It's been going on since black folks was brought here. So we see Booker T. Washington, right? And white folks embrace Booker T's accommodationism, and they didn't appreciate Du Bois's political activism. And those were both light-complected black folks. So a lot of people talk about colorism, but look, if Booker T was darker-complected, they'd have still loved Booker T because it was about his racial politics.
Dr. Cosby, can you flesh that out a little bit for the audience? Dr. Thornhill, I don't know if you have to leave. I know it's a little late. Did you want to say one last thing to the audience?
Well, I mean, I appreciate everybody engaging with my work, and I would add, too, that although my study focuses on higher education, it is true that this kind of phenomenon, this process, is highly likely to be present in all white-controlled organizations. There's no reason, and I can't imagine a location where, like, if we look at nonprofit government agencies, for-profit corporations, I mean, it stretches the mind. It can't be the case that corporations or nonprofits are desiring the anti-racist black folks in general. They don't want racial rabble-rousers. They want folks that are going to be deferential to white authority and obsequious, and that's what they're looking for. So a lot of black folks work their identity to allay whites' concerns and their racial fears. So interestingly, the final thing I'll leave you with is this. We can work our identity in a way that doesn't allow whites to detect our political commitments, but we shouldn't have to do that. And that's the thing that I would tell those students in the fourth category is don't work your identity. All them students should embrace who they are. It's the institutions that need to change, not black folks.
And I appreciate you calling in. Thank you so much. I'm gonna keep you on the line, Dr. Cosby.
Okay.
And
Thank you for having me.
I think we're going to have a special guest in a second. I think Yvette Carnell wants to call in and give her opinion. Dr. Cosby, can you explain the difference between Booker T and Du Bois that he was alluding to earlier?
Well, of course, the Booker T was the consummate accommodationalist. Whites had designed a particular place for blacks in society, and it was always a place of subservience. And Booker T went along in order to get along. He capitulated, whereas Du Bois advanced a political agenda and said that blacks should have an opportunity and a right as citizens of the United States to excel in any areas that they felt called or gifted in. And, of course, Booker T became the most popular black man in his day until he died in 1915, and he was funded by the Rockefellers, and he became the major power broker in black America. Any black institutions that were seeking any type of grant, if it did not get the sanction of Booker T. Washington, you probably would not get it. But you had to pay a terrible price. You know, it resulted in black people agreeing to be slaves to whites, and of course, W.E.B. Du Bois pushed back on that.
Thank you, Dr. Cosby. I think we got a special guest. Let's bring Yvette Carnell in here. Yvette, are you there with us?
I'm there. What's going on, Tone? Hey, Dr. Cosby.
I didn't plan on
How you doing?
I didn't plan on having you until next week, Yvette. You know, next week we're going to be doing the American DOS show. We're going to flesh it out, why American DOS is important. We're going to do a real introduction to it. But let's just get into it, Yvette. You know, I know you had a point. I want you to just kind of deal with it in context of the question number 2. What is the role of sports, Jordan and Kobe, television, Cosby and Fresh Prince, and politics, Obama and Kamala, in making American blackness raceless? Basically, you got to be one of the first 3 categories that the professor mentioned earlier, or you don't get a chance to be in the room speaking just about American DOS, descendants of slavery.
Well, what I think you see, you know, we've had the conversation about the Cosby Show. You wrote that piece in HuffPost, very good piece about the Cosby Show and chocolate-covered black people. And now I think what we're seeing is the sophistication of systemic oppression of DOS people. When I say that, what I mean is Dr. Cosby mentioned the miseducation of the Negro. And we've gotten to a point that where the Negro or the DOS person is so propagandized, you're expected now to be miseducated before you get to the school. So they're not bringing you in anymore like to miseducate you once you get there. They need you to already be raceless. They need the Cosby Show to have like planted that seed in you, and that's who you already are before they get there, because they don't even have time to play with you. And I think we all forget. I don't know we forget, but you all remember all those school protests, those campus protests over anti-blackness and white fragility and these conversations. These schools, no, we're not having that no more. We're not having that anymore. And so what you have is the people that get in that room are basically worthless to other DOS people.
So let's dig right into it, Yvette. I got you here. You know, Michael Jordan, Mr. Raceless. I'm not going to talk about race while I sell cheap shoes to poor black people all across this country. You got Kobe Bryant. It's much the same. You know, people of color. You know, we need to worry about people of color and all people. You got Cosby and Fresh Prince, Will Smith, Mr. You just need to try hard and follow your dreams. You got Obama, the guy that spoke against reparations, and you got Kamala, who's effectively graduated from high school in Quebec, Canada, as a Canadian Indian. None of this makes any sense in terms of black radical like history and black radical necessity that's needed at this moment to push the race forward. And I just say to you, and I bring it back to you, what do you think about all these specific people that I've brought up, Yvette?
Well, that's what it requires. You know, it goes back to this kind of do-for-selfism, right? Like you can do something for yourself. Now, you can't do anything for the collective. That's out. You and I have had that conversation about the timing and everything, the kind of country, the place. You had to have been white in the New Deal or connected to Carnegie when America was growing. We've had that conversation. But what this also shows is that even if you want to make it individually, you can't make it individually as a person who is going to speak to what has happened to DOS people in America. If you're going to have a full-throated advocacy for DOS people, America has no space for you to be in that room. And yeah, one of the things I realized actually while Thornhill was talking, I realized that I kind of knew this intuitively a long time ago. I remember getting a small scholarship when I went away to college. And I remember being interviewed by a panel of white people. It was 3 women, I think 2 men, and they had a scholarship, and they were giving the scholarship away. And I remember them asking me who I admired the most. At that moment, it clicked for me. There's a group of white people. I cannot say like what I really think and what I really feel. I said Hillary Clinton, because I knew that put me into the category of that racist kid, and I wanted that money. And so
this brings into question wealth, Yvette. Like, what does it mean that? Is there space for black radical thought if we don't have no wealth? Does that mean that we have to cow just to be able to get in the room? So then once we in the room, we owe so many favors that we can't use the room. What do you think, Yvette, Dr. Cosby, either one of y'all?
I agree. No, you can't. You have money. See, the thing is, you have nothing to undergird you. And I'm going to let Dr. Cosby, but you have nothing to undergird you. So you end up having to play this game. So you play the game so long. How long before you become the game? How long?
Absolutely. So, and that's the great challenge for presidents of HBCUs like myself, who are trying to be true to the historic mission of an HBCU, and that is the formation of black kids who are committed to the advancement of black people. And because we don't have the resources, to some degree, any form of political black radicalism on my part as the president, I stand the risk of jeopardizing funding for our institution. And of course, as a minister, that's where my faith has to kick in. I just have to do what I know is the right thing to do, and just trust God. But ultimately, you pay a price when you're not compliant to white supremacy, and the difference I think between, say, a Michael Jordan and a Muhammad Ali is that Michael Jordan, this is what white supremacy wants blacks who are black in pigmentation, is what Yvette talked about when she said this thing is not about Crayola, and that there's a difference between being a black in pigmentation and black in identification. What is critically important is that we educate black people to be black in identification.
I think because I got 2 of my favorite people on the line, I'm going to take a few less callers tonight. We're just going to ride through this show because it's so important. What this Professor Thornhill, thank you for calling in, what he exposed is something that we all have been speculating about for decades. And that is that we are being forced out of our own interests. We have to speak for people of color or for racelessness, or we are not accepted in the room. Right. So we all end up with these people at UCLA where it's like a bunch of white people and one black person at the end of the picture.
Well, I had someone to call me today and ask me what I think about the Kavanaugh issue, and I told them I haven't. And the reason I haven't thought about it is because I'm too preoccupied with issues like mass incarceration, which the talking heads on MSNBC, black talking heads on MSNBC, seem to be talking about anymore. I'm too busy talking about the wealth gap between blacks and whites, and the fact that by 2053 blacks will have zero wealth. You know, there's too many issues in the black community that get passed over that for black people to always be engaged in other people's issue to the exclusion of their own, that's a psychological sickness. It's what Asa Hilliard talked about, the great Afrocentric thinker. He had the metaphor of the sheepdog, which he said was an existential contradiction. He said a sheepdog will go against other dogs who are hungry to protect sheep. The sheepdog forgets it's a canine. And the reason why is because when the sheepdog was a puppy, it was raised among sheep. It had a sheep education. It had a sheep preacher. It had their God looked like a sheep and not like a dog. And so by the time it was a full-grown dog, it was anatomically a dog, but psychologically it was a sheep. And we that's what's happening to black people.
Dr. Cosby, Yvette, one thing that I do here is numbers. We don't play around. We don't giggle. My good friend Diedrich Assant, he with Prosperity Now, he did the study, and everybody can pick it up. It's the road to zero wealth, and I have a copy in front of me. And the interesting thing about this road to zero wealth is when you start looking at the numbers. And let me share a couple of these numbers that jump out. The middle black family as of 2013 without depreciating assets was worth $1,700. Well, what they found is by 2020, they're going to be worth $1,400. And by 2024, it'll be $1,200. Understand, all of these are zeros in America. All of these numbers are zero. It's just not enough to even count. But $1,200 by 2024, 2043, it'll be $425. 2053, it'll be zero. And then in 2073, it's negative $850. This is all while white families, the middle white family does this. 2013 is $116 without a depreciating assets, $120,000 in 2020, $122,000 in 2024, and by 2073 it'll be $147,000. So they're going the other way. So the black radical student might be part of the reason this is happening. Not the main reason. The main reason is wealth calcification and race as a whole. But if we don't have black radical students, then what's the point of us being at UCLA, at Harvard, at Stanford? What is the point of us getting access if your access leads to nothing for the race? Yvette, can you speak on that?
Well, yeah, and it's no point. But see, here's what we think. Well, if I could just get to school and get my degree, then I can do it, right? Well, I just got to get through this and play the game. Then you get to a job. Well, I just got to get through this job and get through this interview and play the game. When you on the job, well, I just got to play the game. I just got to play the game and maintain my job. Eventually, though, I'll be able to be a real true black person. And what you find is that no, the whole thing is a game. The whole thing is a game that doesn't allow you to work in a way that advances your people. And the game began a long time ago. And the only thing that the powers that control this country do is perfect this whole game. And it's not just it's so in a way that it benefits white people, and you have to eat the failure. This is a game that's being perfected, and it's not something you just go off to yourself and build your own house and make your own game.
This is Dash Radio, Dash Talk X. We're having this discussion right now. We're going to do a little bit of a game show with Yvette Carnell of Breaking Brown and Dr. Kevin Cosby of Simmons College and St. Stephen's in Louisville. And this game is who fits where. Name the celebrity and what category do they fit in. Let's look at the categories again. Category 1 is the black raceless person. They basically just think of themselves as black after their person. They're just happen to be black. Category number 2 is the environmentalist or the gender rights person. So many of y'all Black Lives Matter activists fit in category 2, not category 4. It's just the truth. We need to have that discussion. Intersectionalists often fit in this category number 2. Don't get me wrong. Some of y'all jump over to 4. Not enough though. Category 3 is the people of color, Obama black. I'm just going to speak for all the people that are disadvantaged, that are brown. Category 4 is the black radical. I don't even know if we have too many of those. I know you got Yvette, you got me, you got Dr. Kevin Cosby, you got Yvette, you got... I'm just saying, though. I'm not... So, look, I'm going to name a name. I got my numbers. I'm going to ask for you guys to tell me yours, and we'll see if we meet. Obama is a what? President Obama.
3, right?
3.
That's what I said too. He's a people of color black person. He got into that office and was trying to speak for everybody. And what's so funny is I don't know if we recognize built into the people of color discussion is a muting of black people. So like, not only do you end up speaking for all people of color, but you end up not talking about reparations because you don't want to hurt like immigrants, as we saw with Obama. So
it's like Neapolitan ice cream.
Come on, explain that.
Chocolate.
Explain that. You say that again? No, say that again.
Chocolate and strawberry, and so he's a Neapolitan brother. I mean, I like chocolate ice cream, and he doesn't challenge. He never challenged white supremacy, and black people got caught up in him because of pigmentation, but he never was about black identification. Never.
Van Jones.
That's number 2.
Yeah, number 2.
I put him in number 2 as well, and then I'll say that he uses number 2 to access kind of a number 3 and then be able to talk about race, but he don't really talk about race in no real radical way. So like it's like number 2 is his environmental green energy push. You know, it's funny because I put that in, don't get me wrong, we need to save the earth, but we going to jail too much to be talking about saving the earth as if the earth is getting destroyed tomorrow. Black folks need to worry about this mass incarceration.
If you're going to talk about saving Earth, let's talk about racist environmentalism, where all the nuclear plants and stuff were redlined into our community. If you want to talk about the environment, let's talk about that. Let's talk about black people having these mystery diseases in these cities. And I will add another category. I know this wasn't part of the study, but if we're having a general discussion, we have to talk about the useless black radical who just talks about I'm going to go to Africa and I'm going to build my own and I'm going to do the person who talks about black radicalism in the most useless way possible. But that's a whole nother discussion.
Yvette out here making her own study, y'all. Break it Brown always go come through. Come on. You right, though. You right, Yvette. Serena Williams. I got her in category 2, y'all. As a gender. She talk about gender so much, I just wonder sometimes, do you remember you black? Go ahead.
I category 2, but I think sometimes she slips in 3 a little bit, like with the people of color stuff. And we're all in it to like my babies and stuff.
Kobe Bryant.
Ooh, I would put Kobe number 1.
Isn't that raceless?
Yeah, I put him in 1. And Michael Jordan as well. I put Michael Jordan as well. Where does Oprah go?
Ooh, she fluctuates primarily 2.
Yeah, 1 or 2. 1 or 2 though, ain't it?
Explain that. No, flesh that out, Dr. Cosby. Why is Oprah in 1 or 2?
Well, I think she appealed to white feminists, and that was her audience. I think that there are times she appealed to black women, but most of her movies and programs were very anti-black men, and so I don't see you can't. It's impossible to be a race woman, and that's what it's really called. You got 2 categories of people, really. You got race people, and you got racial diplomats. And I see Oprah as being a racial diplomat that was about the reconciliation of blacks and whites, whereas I think a race person is a person who's trying to reconcile black with black for the purpose of advancing a black political agenda.
You know what's interesting about what you guys are saying? Byron Allen is one of my friends, and everybody talks about the white wife, but I have to put him almost on 4, like the way he be talking. Y'all, I didn't even know he talked that way until I really sat down with the man, and then I gave y'all an interview, and he's talking about using slave laws and that black people have economic genocide. And it's weird because I think black folks get caught up in the visual. So Oprah gave us the visual of Stedman and then gave us number 2. Whereas Byron Allen on the individual level, and maybe you can speak to this, Yvette, married the white woman, but then gave us number 4 in terms of suing Charter, Comcast, and AT&T, and then being willing to say that black people are facing economic genocide.
Well, yeah, that's why I think we have to be very, very careful in terms of, and it's a sticky thing. It's a very sticky thing in terms of who somebody chooses for a mate. But I think you have to look at what kind of agenda they're advancing and when they're doing it and how you can use that to benefit your group. Because Barack told me he loved Michelle all day long and still didn't do anything for me. So you have to be very careful.
And you know what else is interesting about our generation, Dr. Cosby and Yvette, is we don't understand the power of judicial decisions, of law. So we look at people like, how many jobs did you make yesterday for us? It's like, nah, like to sue using slave laws. See, Univision went and understood it. They followed his path and then tried to sue as well. That y'all locking us out of TV. So like doing something like that sets up a framework of something that somebody else can follow. See, we had that happening all day in the 60s. The problem is a lot of people's parents really weren't political, so they don't even know what they're talking about when they say black radical. They have no exposure. They think black radical is really about like being an entrepreneur and starting a business and being a free enterprise person. Well, that's not really like black radical.
Mm-mm.
You know what I'm saying, Dr. Cosby?
Absolutely.
Can you speak to that?
Well, black radicalism, I think Dr. Martin Luther King, in his last speech, he said that I may not get there with you, but we, and the emphasis is on the word we as a people shall get to the promised land. And the we he was talking about was the black masses. Black radicalism is any time the strength of the strong is made available for the weakness of the weak. So it is what Du Bois talked about with the Talented Tenth, that a black radical agenda is where blacks who have influence and power and resources are using that influence and power for the uplift of the black race.
Come on, Dr. Cosby. I'm gonna do 3 more of these guests. You know, these are 3 big ones. Well, the first of the last 3 is Black Lives Matter as a group.
I would say Black Lives Matter as a group is 3.
I put them in 2 and 3.
Okay.
Yvette, you there?
3.
Yeah, no, I think I would too. I think I would too. I think I probably put them. 2. I think they started as. I think they gave a. And it's so many different Black Lives Matter elements. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to kind of. There's some real people doing real work, and there's some other stuff going on. But the people we see on the national level, like I think they started out with the representation of 4, and then smoothed into like 3 and 2.
I agree. Now let me give you the last 2. Jay-Z and Beyonce as a couple, or you can do them separate.
I think I'd Beyonce 2, and I think Jay-Z's interesting.
I put them both in 2, 3. Nobody's in 4. That's what I'm seeing. Nobody's in 4. Right? Let me do the last one. Don Lemon and everybody black on CNN. Like, what do you think, Dr. Cosby?
Definitely 2 or 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, and so 1, 2. So it's an omission of basically you can't be. Can you be successful in America and be a 4? Can there be black radical? You know, it's funny because I brought up Byron and the guy is like a silent mover, but I really like look around and I see everybody that's successful and black is basically giving white people a chance to feel good about an America that puts more black men in jail out of 19 million men than all women globally. It's like, we not going to talk about that. We just going to talk about Kavanaugh. Or we just going to talk about Trump. What do you think that means, Dr. Cosby, that you just put black CNN into a non-radical category?
It means that we cannot take it seriously, that they are they're nothing but mannequins like a mannequin in a store. They're just mannequins and props to give the illusion of inclusion and to create the false image that we have moved beyond race. And when the fact of the matter is, we're not post-racial, we are post-black.
Yeah, I agree, Doctor. And so, Yvette, I come to you with the 4th question. What is the consequence of Black America for Black America if there's no black radical thought leaders?
Well, then there's no forward progress. There's no forward progress. What you basically have is kind of what happened to you, but on a different level. When you try to do the City Lab article, you just get boxed out.
Let's explain that again. Let's explain that, because basically City Lab allowed an West African woman to write this article about race that made no sense and didn't understand. She didn't understand American race. And then I refuted it. I asked to refute it because it was speaking about American DOS. And I was siphoned off to ask a West African editor whether it's okay to write about African Americans. And so you get boxed out. Explain that, Yvette. Come on.
Well, yeah, I don't think people understand that there's an infrastructure that is being created. And as far as I'm concerned, it's almost finished. The whole purpose of which is to make sure that people like Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore don't get a space to write and advocate in a way that could actually, advocate in a meaningful way for American DOS people. That is the agenda. So that what it gets represented to white America is that, well, all we want is some equality and people of color, and let's explain to you, and we want some more understanding and empathy. That's what they want. They don't want anybody to say, no, this we've been eating this thing, we don't want to eat no more, we want you to make us whole. There's a whole people whose job it is to make sure we don't get the space to say that nationally.
Yeah, I got on the phone with CNN and they asked me about Trump, and I said Trump just another white man in a long line of rich white men, and he's bad for black folks, but so is Hillary, and they didn't call back. There's an agenda of what's supposed to be talked about. And if you ain't talking about that, then you a problem. And that's the problem with not having wealth. When me and Byron did an article together, 8 Solutions to Make America Great Again, basically lampooning Obama and also laying out what Obama could do for black folks, Huffington Post didn't want to put it out. They published everything that I had written up to that point. It's 8 Solutions to Make America Great Again. Wrote it with this billionaire. He gave it to Obama. Because he was going hard on Obama, they didn't want to put it out. But when he said, I caught Ariana, it all changed. And I'm saying to you, we don't have that enough. We don't have enough black people that have enough wealth, power, and positioning to make sure that black folks are in the room. But the other problem is that we got too many black people in the room that's using blackness to get in the room, and they're not speaking for black people. Didn't you just do the show on, Roxanne Gay? Yvette?
Yeah.
And the whole Access to Exeter probably came through blackness, meaning you look like DOS. We gonna do some diversity, but you get in the room and you are number 2. You talking about gender. Until it's time to talk about get popular off of race, then you're gonna talk about Trump, not race. You know what I'm saying, Yvette?
Exactly. You're gonna talk about Trump and not you're very comfortable with people having this presentation of you as being something that you are not. You're very comfortable with this presentation that you are DOS, and people seeing that in you, and you don't say no, this is not who I am, and I come from a very different life. I can have a very different, and even when you talk about race, like Roxanne Gay's whole piece about race was actually about. Could have been named. The name of the article shouldn't have been Trump and racism. It should have been Haiti is not a shithole, because that's all she talked about the entire article.
Yeah, so, and that's not race.
You should just talk about that.
Talking about Haiti is not talking about race. Race is built out of slavery, Jim Crow, the effects of racism here in America. That's just what it is. That's ethnic. Like, don't get me wrong, that's ethnic oppression. But the idea that race is not built out of our bones being crushed by the pressures of slave chains is something that's really gotten lost by not allowing number 4, the radical student, to lead the discussion. This needs to be led, blackness needs to be led by the number 4 person. If it isn't, y'all all gonna be in trouble. Y'all ask for solutions, that is the solution. I tell you again, the hashtag American DOS will be the only answer for black America. You will be shut out without that. And so I come to the number 5. Where do biracials like Obama and Tracy Silberstein, y'all don't know her as Tracy Silberstein? Her name is Tracy Ellis Ross on TV, but in real life it's Tracy Silberstein because her dad's a Jewish man, raised her Jewish. Fit, where do they fit? Biracials like Obama, who inherited $400,000 from his white grandma and was raised white. Fit, and do they undermine black progress for conciliatory individual acceptance? White parent, black parent. So I need to be a number 3. I need to make race make sense, but in making it make sense, I'm talking. I'm not really an advocate for black people because I don't know nothing about what black people go through because I came from whiteness. What do you think, Yvette?
I think they fit in all the categories, but the last one, depending on mostly who you talk to. I'm not saying that there are some who don't and who do real work, but I think a lot of them fit in those three categories, and they navigate through whichever one is like most beneficial.
What do you think, Dr. Cosby, about the biracial, like a President Obama or Tracy Silberstein today?
I'm more concerned about their agenda and less concerned about their pigmentation. I think until we can get back to the agenda that we had in the 60s, in which the whole social justice movement of the 60s was designed to repair a specific group, and that was the descendants of slaves and the victims of Jim Crow apartheid. And that's black people. That's what Preston Johnson said in June of 1965 at Howard University, that it was for black people. And I think that the ultimate goal of whether or not what number you're in is who do you think the whole justice movement was for? What was reparations for? Who was supposed to be the beneficiaries of affirmative action? And if you have some universal answer and not a very narrowed and specific answer to that question, then you're not number 4. And if you are not number 4, then you are no good to black people.
Come on.
I'm the pastor of a black church. We are unapologetically black. And blackness means, a black institution must mean 3 things, and it all begins with the letter C. You know you're dealing with a number 4 black institution when it reflects black culture, it reflects black control, and it reflects black concerns. And one thing that the church that at one time, especially in the historical black church of the 19th century, when it started, it was a number 4 institution. But there's a great book on the history of the black church by a scholar named Gayrod Wilmore, and the name of the book is Black Religion and Black Radicalism. And his whole thesis is that the black church started as a radical institution. It's the mother of our institutions. And it gave birth to the other 4 primary institutions of black people. There are 5 basic institutions that black people govern, and that's the black church, the black family, black businesses, black media, and black schools. And all of these institutions started off as number 4 institutions, and
black radical.
Black radical. And, we that word radical, if you trace the etymology of the word radical, it literally means roots. It means getting back to the roots or the basics. So, it is not something nefarious to say that you're radical. It means that you get back to the roots. And getting back to the roots means that black people and black institutions must advance a black agenda. We must have number 4 church. If we're going to survive, if we're going to thrive in America, we must have number 4 churches, we must have number 4 parents, and we must have number 4 political leaders.
Come on.
I'm so sick and tired of black people voting for black leaders who are elected officials, but they don't represent us. We don't need elected officials. We need representatives.
Man, this show was fire. Next week, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to have Yvette back. We're going to get into this American DOS. And is it a major part of pushing for fairness for the black radical, for black America? Do we got to reclassify? And are the new immigrants jumping into categories 1 through 3 to basically escape the cost of blackness that is held deeply in number 4? Which is the black radical, the tradition of the black radical. Yvette Carnell, tell them where they can find you, please. And then I'm going to give Dr. Cosby a chance.
Monday and Wednesday, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, YouTube, Breaking Brown, and at Breaking Brown on Twitter. So I'll talk to everybody then. And tomorrow, everybody, if you're in Chicago, come out at 12:30, and we're gonna have some conversation.
And Dr. Cosby, please tell them a little bit about your church and Simmons College mission.
St. Stephen Baptist Church is a church that's located in the poorest, numerically the largest black church in the state of Kentucky. And I'm also the president of Simmons College of Kentucky, which is the oldest private, in fact, it's the oldest historical black college university in the state of Kentucky. We have 2 HBCUs. That's Kentucky State and Simmons, and I've been the president of Simmons for 13 and a half years.
All right. Thank you so much for calling in. We look forward to seeing you next week, Friday, 7 p.m. Please use tonetalks.org to subscribe and donate. I'll see y'all next week. Tone Talks presents the reality behind the racial wealth gap. In America, we understand race as a literal foot race, where whites just got a lead based on effort, when in actuality, due to several hundred years of slavery and 100 years of Jim Crow, black people were more like the shoes whites wore down to run forward economically. The recent data from the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances tells a story that even though the media shows us young black millionaires like Steph Curry and LeBron James, without the family car, the middle black family is worth just over $4,000, while the middle white family is worth over $140,000 using the same accounting. In fact, according to the Federal Reserve data, the middle or 50th percentile black family is equivalent in wealth to the 20th percentile white family. In terms of wealth, black middle is the equivalent of white poor. The upper echelon of wealth tells us much the same story, showing that white America makes up nearly all of our nation's top 1%, with only 380,000 black families having a net worth more than even a single $1 million. All while, according to the new data, 15% of white families are worth more than $1 million, and over 1 million white American families are worth more than $10 million. The racial wealth difference isn't just a gap. It's a seismic hole that's only growing and needs policy immediately to fix it. Subscribe to learn more at tonetalks.org.